Well, in the last video we were working on this corn planter, and not much different from what we're doing here today. So we did end up using the hydraulic press for the first time. That's something that I've had for a year now. That worked very nicely. Putting the races and the plastic sleeve in these hubs. One thing I forgot to show you was I ended up breaking one of these hubs. I ended up pushing this sleeve down in there with that little jack stub, and it got kind of cockeyed a little bit, and we ended up breaking or cracking this hub here. So I forgot to show you that in the last video. So what we're getting ready to do now is we're going to pack all of these bearings with wheel bearing grease and start installing them into the hubs. And then we've got a seal that's going to go in on each side of the bearings, and then we can start putting them hubs on the corn planter. So kind of a boring day's worth of work here. Jared has discovered that he has 3 head bolts that are not correct, and that's these guys here, and he's got all these other ones just setting down into the thread point, and these ones are too long. So before he can torque this head down, he has to have the correct bolts. So these bolts are oddballs, and all of the other ones that came out were the length that they needed to be. So they're mix matched, if you will. So he's hoping that they'll be able to deliver them today. He's hauling manure right now, and we're getting rain. We had our snowstorm here Tuesday into Wednesday, and it is raining here right now. The snow is leaving us, so that's very nice. And we also had our first delivery of seed corn here today. It's 6 boxes of Hubner seed drop. Nate ended up unloading that, and he's going to be back in here in a few minutes. Okay, we will show you what we have done here so far. We've got all of the hubs on for the fertilizer discs. I had 16 hubs for the planter. We've got 4 spares, so we had 40 bearings to pre-pack. I've got all the hubs on. They're all set. Fitzy went through and put all the discs on. Now he's going through and installing new bolts that come up against that Tomahawk scraper. He's taking the old ones out and putting new ones in, just because the heads of the bolts, they were the original bolts. The heads of the bolts were rounded off, and every so often you have to adjust them. And I wasn't looking forward to having to utilize vice grips doing an infield adjustment. So he'll go through all of those, and then he'll anti-seize all these shafts for the gauge wheel itself, put them on, and then that'll wrap that job up. We've got to go through and grease everything. We've eyeballed all of our seed openers, and it looks like we have the proper clearance that we need to have. I told you the other day, we don't bother getting the business cards out. You know why we don't do the business card trick? Because as soon as I get a business card, it ends up in the trash, so I don't have no business cards. And I don't play cards. We did have a couple of these plastic inserts that go in the gauge wheel that cracked, and we have replaced them. We didn't replace them with new ones. We replaced them with the older style gauge wheel that we've had on an old like 1750 corn planter. The arm, I thought I had an arm on the bench here. I don't. But the arm for this style wheel here, the wheel is held on with a M16 bolt. On the old 1750 corn planter, there was just a hole in the end of the arm. You shoved the shaft of the bearing through and you ran in a, I don't know if it was maybe a 10mm bolt, and that jammed against this shaft here. And that's how the arm was held on. And it just so happens to be that these inserts, the center part of this plastic insert is the same diameter, and you can just knock them out and put your bearing, open bearing style hub in there. So I do have to get a couple of plastic inserts because we've got a pile of these old wheels, maybe 6 or 8 of them, that we'd like to be able to utilize now that we've got this 16 row and a 12 row planter. It'd be nice to have parts that you could just grab. So Jared ended up getting the 3 bolts that he needed. He's going through now and going through a torque sequence. He bought this nice torque wrench from Snap-on, and it's all digital readout. Now you'll see that there's some new paint on this head. Don't worry, we got the threads chased out. What'd you have to do? Run them bolts in like 5 or 6 times to chase them threads? Just kept running them in with an impact. No, it was more than 6 times. So he ran all the bolts in a number of times. It took quite a bit to get them threads cleaned out, but he's fairly confident that he has a clean set of threads. Well, actually the block. He believes he's got clean threads now to be able to get these bolts seated. A lot of that paint came up onto the head gasket. He lifted the head off and he just brushed the dried up paint off of there. So have you got Loctite installed in all them holes? Did you use the red or the blue?
Maybe well.
Oh, so he's using Loctite too. We don't want this head to come off, so we're not too awful sure if he's going to be able to get all these bolts through the sequence before the Loctite gets dry. But if it doesn't, at least he'll know, you know, once he gets to the point where he's starting to torque hard, he'll know that the Loctite has done its job here. So we're gonna keep at it here, and yeah, what do you think there, bub? You don't know? You feel that you got the Loctite technique down good? Yeah. Did you use a whole bottle? You did? Jeez, that stuff's expensive. But it was only a half a bottle on the last one. You don't feel that was enough, do you? No. Well, all right. I got to get back to it here. Well, Jared has gone through, what have you done so far? The initial torque, and then you've got to go through, and he's got to turn the bolt, what is it, 90 degrees, 3 different times. This torque wrench here, he can set it so that he's doing a 90-degree turn, which is a quarter turn. He's almost there, bang. Now another important thing is he'll put a block of wood on here and he'll whack the head with a sledgehammer. What is it, 4 blows or is it 5 after you've done the torque sequence? And then that'll really seat the bolts down into the block. So he's got a printout here of his actual torque sequence. Do not hit the block with a sledgehammer. Don't clean out the threads with an impact. We are kidding. Got to make that clear. Somebody will
kidding though.
somebody who will do that.
I didn't know we were kidding.
This is not a how-to channel. Most of the time it's don't do what we do type thing, but oh well. Yeah, that's a rather nice torquer wrench, huh? We have a neighbor that wanted to use our other torque wrench one time. Wanted to know if he could borrow it. I said, I don't know. I said, what do you got to do? He said, I got a couple of bolts that I can't break loose, and I thought it would be easier just to use that torque wrench you got because it's got a long handle on it. No kidding. I'm not kidding you either. That goofball actually said that. So, yeah. I guess there's no such thing as putting a cheater bar on a 3/4 breaker bar. Bang, bang. Well, we're down to the last little bit of what we need to do to this planter. Betsy's got these fertilizer discs just about done. How much anti-seize do you have all over your face? None.
It's in my sweatshirt.
How much is in that jar? How much is left?
Like a little under half.
No. We anti-seized he anti-seized these shafts up real nice like so that they will come apart in 2 years. It's about how long these fertilizer discs last. This is probably more work monkeying around with these fertilizer discs than it is to do anything else on this planter when it comes to putting iron on it. Next year we'll probably have to replace the seed opener discs. They are in pretty good shape, and what we have found in the past, we had years ago, we had a 1750 corn planter and we had a 1780. They were both 6-row. And they had, the 1780 had that single disc no-till coulter, that wavy coulter up front. And that seemed to not only kick some of the stones out of the way, but it softened the ground up, and we've got more life out of the discs. Now, that's what this corn planter had on it before. We put this update kit on here. It's got the row cleaners on it. We're not really doing no-till. We usually have them up out of the way. They're just lightly scuffing the ground. But the nice thing about them, they'll move small stones out of the way, a little bit of trash that's left on top of the ground, but we don't usually have much trash because we're doing tillage. Now, what we're running into now is I'm having problems with these arms for the gauge wheels. I got this one here, had a grease zerk broke off in it. I'm on my 4th one right now that I'm dealing with, and I don't remember having any problems with the arms that were on this old kit that was on this planter. Now we're going into the 8th year with this planter, and I've never had, like I said, I've never had any problems with the grease zerks on these arms. So I've got one over in the vise here. This one is broke clean off. I greased it, pulled the grease gun hose off of it, and I had the grease zerk in the hose when I went to go to the next one. So I'm hoping that Deere didn't opt to put cheaper parts into this kit opposed to what they put on the planter when it comes out of the factory. If that is the case, I'm not going to be too happy. I did have 2 of these plastic parts of the gauge wheel crack. I've never replaced one of them before. So maybe this kit is made out of cheaper components. Who knows? Jared's got all these head bolts tight. I don't know what he's got going on now. He's putting, what do you got going into, oh, he's got push rods going in. Ooh, exciting. Exciting. How are you making out, bub? Get your oil filter out? You got the filter wrench stuck on the oil filter. Is the new oil filter the same thread? Andrew's doing a little bit of service work on the mini truck. He's got the oil dumped out of it. And he's got an alternator belt to replace on it. This one it's got some bad spots in it. So he's got to get the alternator loosened up, throw a new belt on there. And we need to help him figure out whether or not we've got the right filter for it. Just take and whack that thing with a hammer. It'll come right off. Picked up a filter down to Napa, and it might not be the right one. It's the same number that goes on Jared's, and I don't know why it would be any different. But at any rate, that's what we run into from time to time. I better help him get this wrench off of here, socket. Oh. Alright, let's check our threads here. Boy, this is kind of heavy, huh? This has got some debris in it. Alright, so we're going to try to get him going here. Make sure this filter that he's got, it looks like it's the right thread. Just take this new filter. That ain't the same. The O-rings line up.
No.
The O-rings don't line up. Jared's truck has probably got a different filter than yours. So, yeah. Let's look these numbers up here. I don't know. There ain't any numbers on this one, is there? Oh, well. Alright. Well, the filter that we had seems to be the right one. Jared ended up getting it up on there for him. Hey, you know what the real question is? We say Chinese products are second rate. What do the Japanese, what do the Chinese buy for second rate parts? It appears that the filter that was on there wasn't quite the right one, but it could just be that there's not anything that crosses over correctly. But the one that we have is the same thread. The O-ring base is a little larger, but where the filter goes on is quite a bit bigger too, and it will accept where the O-ring seats up against the block. So we better get our grease zerk dug out here and get a new zerk put into it. We probably should go through and take all the grease zerks out, put all new zerks in, to get out ahead of our problem there. Well, I guess we've got this done. The one thing that we have left to do here is we have to change the oil on the generator that goes on the PTO, but we're gonna get this one out of here, get it put over into a storage barn, and then get the other planter in and start working on that. So we'll worry about getting the oil changed on the generator that provides the power for the row units. We'll worry about that when we get a little closer to planting. He's caught one side, didn't catch the other. I he's got to try to back up a little bit. There we go. Bang, bang. So we'll hook up some hoses. We don't need to hook them all up. We just need to hook up the main frame hoses and get our wire harness hooked up for the fold box and get our light plug plugged in. Now what we ended up doing, Fitzy actually did it, he changed all of the grease zerks on the gauge wheel arms, put new grease zerks in, and hopefully we're not going to run into any problems with them breaking off mid-season here. So we might as well go ahead and get the rest of our hoses and lines hooked up here. And we've got to take this a couple miles down the road, get it put away, and hook onto the other one. We got the 8320 that we're hustling this around with right at the moment. Do you know what hoses go where? Now you're gonna need this one here and yeah, these two. It's the only two we got to put in. So we might as well toss them up underneath there and get them hooked up. This is how you have this job done. This guy fits right in there nicely. So all we need is the main frame hoses. We've got the light plug plugged in. That's what gives the power to the fold box. And then he's trying to get the fold box wire plugged in here. So we'll tie up these other hoses. You get that plugged in, that's all plugged. Now you got to climb out of there. So we'll tie up some of these other wires so they ain't dragging on the road here, and we'll get this thing put away. So yeah.